My name is Dr. Kira Lindsay, and I'm a historian and a biographer. And I'm also the Vice President of the History Council of New South Wales. And I'm super excited to be hosting today's event, which is one of two events that the History Council is hosting within History Week this year. We have three fabulous speakers today who are going to help us explore this question of lost exhibitions, grieving, regrouping, and grasping new possibilities in the COVID context. But before we talk about this in a little more detail, I want to acknowledge that in Australia, we live and work on sovereign and unceded First Nation land. While acknowledging country is something that we actively do now in Australia and something that's kind of become a familiar act of history making, we at the History Council of New South Wales take this really seriously because it's such a great opportunity to reflect upon the role of history in our everyday lives, as well as the legacies of the past and the impact that this has on the here and now and upon First Nations people who have not only survived those legacies, but also found ways to thrive despite them. We acknowledge that enormous resilience and resourcefulness, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. And we also express our gratitude for the beautiful country and culture that they have cared for from the ground up for centuries after centuries, and which they so generously continue to share with us. All right, so lost exhibitions. Well, the second wave of the pandemic in New South Wales has caught a lot of people and organisations off guard. There we all were, planning events and organising visits to various institutions and getting ready to see and celebrate the hard work that program designers, curators and artists and all those other people do. But then boom, the doors closed, the masks came back out, and we found ourselves in yet another lockdown that just seems to go on and on. Tragically, like the secret paintings of Hilma of Kilt, which are likely to remain unseen by most of us, as that long-awaited exhibition at the Art Gallery of New South Wales now packs up and moves on to its next destination. While it was meant to be here from June until September for 3 months, there was a window of opportunity to go and see that. It lasted only 3 weeks. But many other museums and galleries and history institutions have not even had that chance with their long planned and prepared exhibitions. So today we're going to find out a little bit more about what happens to those exhibitions and what has happened since the June lockdown began. Are they still there? Are they locked behind closed doors? Are they waiting for health orders before they can reopen for the public? How much creative endeavour is currently being hidden out of sight or being put online? How are different museums and public historians dealing with these crazy times of the COVID context? What sort of cool stuff and innovative ideas and resourcefulness is being stimulated by this situation? And what does it all mean for us as members of the public as well? If culture is us, what happens when we don't get to curate it, share it, celebrate it as a collective? Or, and how are we going to turn this into a huge opportunity to find new ways to collaborate and connect? What do we need to know about the recent changes so that we can rethink tourism and technologies, curatorial practices and consumer trends? We might not get all the answers to those questions today, but hopefully we'll start to think a little bit more about how to define and refine those questions. So each of our wonderful speakers is going to have about 10 minutes each with a little bit of Q&A at the end, and then we'll finish at the very end with about 5 or so minutes for Q&A from the audience. So we'll get questions along the way and questions at the end. And with that, I'll introduce you to our first speaker, who is Aviva Wolf, who is the Chief Operations Manager and Events Manager also at the Sydney Jewish Museum. Aviva has lived in Australia for 25 years, but as you'll hear from her accent, she's originally from South Africa. And she's worked at the Sydney Jewish Museum for 10 years in that dual role as Operations and Events Manager. And So she's in charge, really, of the public programs that are hosted by those museums. Aviva also has, she says in her bio, 2 children and 3 grandchildren who give her much joy. So over to you, Aviva, to tell us about what's been happening at the Jewish Museum.
Kira, thank you to yourself, to Catherine, and to the History Council of New South Wales for putting on this wonderful webinar. What a fantastic idea. And for inviting the Sydney Jewish Museum and myself to participate. We're very grateful for that. I'll start at the beginning of our last exhibition. Wonderful artist and award-winning artist Wendy Sharp had contacted our head curator Rosalind Sugarman some time back with a wonderful idea. She had found her father's diary and discovered that she had Jewish history dating back to the Ukraine in the 1900s. And she and her cousin Ruth had undertaken a journey in 2019 to try and rediscover her Jewish family history in the Ukraine. So off they went to the town of Kameniec-Podilsky. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. And they started their journey of discovery. Her father had written about his mother, Bessie, and she had always sung a song in Yiddish and in Russian called Wo ist das Gisela? Where is the little street? And that's what the exhibition was called, Wo ist das Gisela? Wendy did an amazing little postcards of every little bit of their journey. So she almost drew a diary of their journey, what they discovered, the town, the bits in the town, photographs, her grandmother, and she'd put this all together. And having come back to Sydney, she thought, what was she going to do with this fabulous story and all these beautiful images she had drawn? And she said to Rosalind, I think I would like to do a mural at the Sydney Jewish Museum. What we decided was that our gallery, it would be the last exhibition in our temporary gallery, which was going to be converted into offices. And therefore, we decided Wendy could draw on the walls because we wouldn't have to repaint, we wouldn't have to tear it down. And she loved the idea of being able to draw on the walls and then paint it over so that the story became a memory. And it was there, everyone saw it, and then it vanished. And we absolutely loved that idea, that this mural would come to life, everyone would see it, she would talk about it, and then it would disappear. And then, as you said, COVID struck, but we were still hopeful that it was going to be very minor, and we decided we would take the chance and let Wendy start this wonderful painting. Well, a few of us were very, very lucky because over a sort of 10-day period, we watched this 40-meter mural in the most brilliant colors come to life. So Wendy had the photograph of her family, which she redrew. She had the town and the castle in the town, which she drew on the walls. She had this huge image of her grandmother, Bessie, which she drew on the walls. And as I said, it was called, we had all the pamphlets printed with the story. It looked absolutely amazing. And then, of course, the lockdown became stricter and stricter, and we got more and more nervous. And luckily, we had decided to video the entire process. So from the time Wendy started with the blank walls to the time she had finished was all captured. And we've had 2 or 3 amazing webinars where we've been able to show the audience how Wendy started the process. She talked them through the story, she answered all the questions, and we were able to pan through and actually share the beautiful visions with the audience, which isn't quite the same as being there in person, but we were so pleased that we had captured what was there to see. It also piqued the interest of many, many journalists. They loved this idea of the sadness of having this beautiful exhibition, which no one was actually going to see. So we had a lot of publicity, a lot of write-ups. Their imagination was captured both by what Wendy had drawn and both by the sad idea that it was going to disappear. which was actually always the idea, but the fact that no one saw it between painting and disappearing was the really sad part. At the moment, the offices are actually in progress of being built. And what we've decided is that the first part of the mural has been able to be saved and will be on the wall of a meeting room. So we've been able to save the first part of this beautiful mural, and that will be there to remind us that this lovely exhibition was and now is in our memory. What we're hoping to do is maybe publish a book, because we've also taken lots and lots of photographs of every part of the mural, or maybe have a little mini exhibition when things improve and we can allow people, obviously not to see it on the walls, but to see parts of it and the way it was. People were writing us, begging us to take down the walls, save the bits. Everybody had ideas of how we could save the exhibition, but unfortunately that did not come to fruition. So Voice dos Gisela is our lost exhibition. What is really beautiful is that we had a lady come in and she sings the actual song in Yiddish, which has formed the background music to this beautiful video. So I am pleased to be able to share a little snippet of Wendy painting, give you an idea of what the mural looked like, and give the audience an opportunity of seeing something that everybody missed. So if I may, I will probably share my screen now and hope this all works.
All of this work I'm about to do here needs to disappear at the end. So it will be painted over and it will be gone at the end of the exhibition.
When Wendy first came up with her concept to trace her family roots going back to the Ukraine, she came to the museum with a proposal and showed it to me, and I think I immediately fell in love with it.
Hi, Wendy Sharp. Thank you. I'm in the temporary exhibition space of Sydney Jewish Museum, and I'm about to paint on all of these walls. I've started to plot them out in chalk, a mural that is inspired by a trip I made in 2019 with my cousin Ruth. We went first of all around the East End and around London, and then we went to the Ukraine. And the plan came from some of these folding books that I actually made when I was in the Ukraine. I'm not just drawing where I went and what I saw, I'm also trying to show something about how I felt, which is what I want this mural to be.
For Wendy, it's not just the art, it's not just the mural, it's the telling and the processing and the working through and the spilling out of everything that she has inside of her about tracing her family roots and painting on the walls in such a way that it's open enough for a visitor to interpret elements of it for themselves.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
We can't.
No,
Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
I'm so excited.
What motivated you? What inspired you rather to want to do this?
When I started to do this, looking into family history, I found an amazing document written by one of my relatives where he writes a very short paragraph about every member of the family, describing what they were like and various things that happened in their life. I never met Bessie, my grandmother. She died in the 1950s when she was only 50, before I was born, in England. And when he talks about Bessie, he says, you know, how terrible it was that her husband died and da-da-da-da. And then he writes, and she used to sing this song.
Wie is de stijgele, wie is de drijfale, en wie is de schiel?
Where is the street, where is the house? Longing for a place which is gone, and then realizing that when you reach that in your dreams, it no longer exists.
It is the stories of our people. It's the stories of the Jewish people as they moved through time in history from place to place where they're not wanted, or where they have to escape pogroms, or they have to go through wars.
Kamenets Podolsky, which I'm painting now, in 1941, over 3 days, 23,000 Jews were killed.
And by its very nature, this mural is ephemeral. And like that world she's painting, it's going to disappear.
We felt like we were looking, well, we are looking for the past that's gone anyway, but we also felt like we ourselves were almost ghosts walking through it.
So not only is the mural a first for us, but having an artist actually producing her art in the space as an artist in residence is the first for our museum.
Finished. Finished.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Aviva. That's incredibly moving. And I just feel compelled to sort of dwell for a moment on the themes of loss that are both in the video and the story, and how much they sort of, they just echo, I guess, what we're talking about today in terms of dealing with what is ephemeral, transitory, and how we celebrate something and recognise that it isn't going to last forever. So it's just very moving, isn't it? And I'd like to ask you what you feel that Wendy and the museum have lost by not having in-person attendance. I'd like to dwell on that just for a moment.
I think we lost Wendy connecting with the audience, with wanting to share this beautiful story, because she's so passionate about it, and she's so passionate about what she found, and she's so passionate about this grandmother that she never met and the beautiful songs. So I think she was really, really sad that people weren't going to see it in person, and she wasn't going to be able to explain directly every single part of it. But I think she was so grateful that we were able to capture it in a way that we have it for history and in perpetuity, and that people will be able to look at it again and again, because I've seen that video many times and I've walked past the exhibition many times, and every time you notice something different. So, that's one part about having captured it, even though it's disappeared and gone, people will be able to see it and will be able to share it, and Wendy will be able to tell the story in the future. So in that part, we've been lucky. And she always wanted to have this sort of ephemeral feeling of something coming and going, as history does. History is there for a moment and then disappears in time, and then you look back on it. And I think that's exactly what this exhibition has done. It's allowed us to look back on something that was, and it becomes part of history and memory. So I think that's been wonderful.
Thank you, Aviva. I'm sure that our audience will have a lot more questions for you at the end, and I certainly have another question I'd like to ask you, but just to make sure that all of our speakers get some time first, I'd like to thank you and come back to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kira.
Thank you. So our next presenter is Erica Taylor, who's the Acting Museum Director at the Tweed Regional Museum. Erica has 20 years experience of working in the glam sector. She started her career in the Powerhouse Museum, actually, in Sydney, curating several nationally recognised science and design exhibitions and programs. She started the Tweed Regional Museum in 2012 and has been an integral part in transforming that museum into a professional organisation. She's in the process, she steered the museum through trials and tribulations of the COVID pandemic, and they've won some national awards for their exhibition and program work. So that is no mean achievement, Erica. And with that, I'm going to put myself on mute and hand it over to you.
Thank you. My talk today it's really focused on not what we lost, but what we learnt. And I'll share some slides with you in a moment. And I think people who are listening, who are in the industry, might be really interested. You know, we're a very small museum, and if you're not, it's a look behind the curtain at kind of what happens behind the scenes when these things happen and over the last 2 years. Now, I'll just share my screen. All right, so we are a very small museum up on far north coast of New South Wales in Moolumba. That is our team, and there's 5 of them there, and there's only actually 3.2 full-time employees of us spread across the 5 of us. The best team anyone could hope for. We have one of the best workplace cultures I've ever encountered anywhere, and we can do anything, and we do a lot of great things. Also to note, our director left us in March, so for this majority of this year, we've been at 2.2 full-time employees. And last year, we all worked through the first lockdown. So they locked us down. We found 5 isolated offices were found for us so we could work in isolation, not having to be with other people. And boy, did we work. We just went full steam ahead in those isolated offices. You know, it's like a bomb goes off when your whole schedule for programs and exhibitions has to change very quickly. We were lucky that our major exhibition at the time was on loan from the Powerhouse, Design Nation, and it had just been installed. I think it had been open for 3 days when we had to close. So, you know, we were quite lucky because we had that there. It was ready to go. Being a small museum, we are super flexible in our ability to change our exhibition schedule. You know, so we always knew we might just put that exhibition on a bit longer. Luckily, the Powerhouse agreed to loan it to us for longer and moved everything around. But we absolutely launched into digital work in almost a panic in absence of our programs and exhibitions. You know, we did it all. We did virtual tours. We, you know, had things and activities up for kids pretty quickly. We did history from home on social media, various social media programs. We did interactive activities with the community when we asked them to write us letters. You know, all kinds of other programs. Our social media obviously was a big outlet for posting just hundreds and hundreds of photos from the collection during that time. Ask a Curator Day, we did that too. As well as at this time, as I'm the curator, I'm also collecting COVID and everything as it's happening. So I was lucky enough to contract a really good photographer in our area and able to send him out to do a photo essay on his own so he could work in isolation, and we had no contact. And he was able to get right out in the community and just take some wonderful photos for our collection. You know, as well as collecting, you know, hand sanitizer that was being made locally and border documents, border signs, all that kind of thing. And so we went full throttle with all the things. And it was very, very intense. You know, launching into all of those digital projects. And so we're at full speed, and then of course we reopen and lockdown finishes. And there's no sigh of relief. It's you have to gear up to go even harder to, you know, get all your programs and exhibitions back on schedule and advertise them and get your communication back. And we're lucky enough to be able to open Design Nation, so we had that brand new exhibition that the community could come and see. But even like keeping on top of communication about restrictions. Can you wear masks? Are we open? Are we closed? Are we 4 meters apart? Are we 2 meters apart? For our very small team, it takes a lot of effort on top of all this work you've done and this reopening and all those. So keeping up with the public health orders was also very challenging. But then, of course, we had programs planned that were a mess, that weren't going to work with the public health order restrictions. So we were constantly changing, cancelling, you know, all of our programs, all of our program work over that time, which was really, really difficult. Oh, the other thing, of course, we did when we reopened was all, you know, people couldn't touch anything in the museum anymore. And we have quite a few audio interactives that we quickly had to integrate, you know, QR codes to be able to interact with any audio that was happening, which was also, you know, learning new skills and quite a lot of work. And it's all quite exhausting to do those things. And so meanwhile, while we were getting back on our feet, we were developing this planned project called Small Town Queer, which is a project that explores the Tweed's LGBTQIA history. And it was always actually planned to be a digital exhibition. It's an online exhibition and collection project. Just because when we started it, we the whole premise of the exhibition was that we actually have nothing about LGBTQ history in the area. We have nothing to put an exhibition together with. So by nature, it was going to be digital. And the project consists, we built in so many digital avenues where people could interact with it. And we really stretched again our digital kind of skills and really grew our skills from this project. The project has our first podcast, which we created, which, you know, when we planned to do this was to interview all of our participants for the podcast in a studio with top-notch audio, you know, gear. And the COVID restrictions meant we couldn't do that. So we had to adapt, and we had to use products like Zoom and other online products to be able to do these interviews. Our participants also were stuck all over Australia, in the Northern Territory, in Sydney, all places. So we actually managed to do them all without, I think we only physically saw one person. We snuck in there during a time where the restrictions weren't so great. It's got a digital story map that we've used online products to create. It's also got an interactive space for the community to upload their own stories, which they did. We built in analytics and how we were going to measure the success of this project from its start, which we did in after we'd finished. It's hugely successful. We had a huge uptake in all the kinds of interactive things we built into it. And so we were doing this whole project from November till about March. And we recently won the Magna Award for temporary exhibitions for it. We were also shortlisted for the Premier's Digital History Award, which was fantastic. And so that's one of our biggest projects we did, which was a digital project, but very different to the digital projects we did in reaction to that first COVID lockdown. So we did come out of that lockdown period with all of our staff had a ton of new digital skills and a fluid way of working across digital platforms, we're also, as we always have been, adaptable and flexible with, changing everything we do, our programming and our exhibitions. But we also came out of that time exhausted. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental work as well, and it's gone on and on and on. And so I think this is an interesting point as well when I was talking to Catherine about this talk, is that this idea of grief is a real thing when you work in this industry. It's cyclic. We work on exhibitions and programs, develop them, we'll research or write, and then we put them on, we open them, and then we move on to the next one. We've been missing that dopamine hit from opening something. It's very hard, and yeah, it's a very real thing. So of course we adapted. We now create kind of COVID safe programs. We create different levels of how the program can be delivered depending on what the public health order might be, if it's masks, if it's 4 square metres, if it's 2 square metres. This was one we did over summer, which is a treasure hunt, where I can't remember our restrictions at the time. We still couldn't have children sit down and do anything in the museum. They couldn't touch anything. There was a 4 square metre rule in place. So kids with their parents came and picked up this great treasure hunt map we made, which led them to finding clues throughout the museum, but then outside the museum through the local business district, even into the local art gallery, to find clues which they could then put together to win a prize. And it was advertised as COVID safe, and over that summer we've had the busiest attendance we've had in 7 years in our little museum, which kind of overwhelmed us, but it was fantastic. So this time round, what are we doing? This lockdown is very different. As I mentioned, we've been with no director since March, and I've been acting director but leaders with no curator, as happens in small places. And we're tired and we're short-staffed, and half of us are looking after and caring for people at home, which really has to be acknowledged. We also don't feel like our community is wanting that digital push that happened in last year. So yeah, we don't feel that. And, in a repeater, I have a new exhibition, Fight for the Right, and it opened on the very same day we locked down this year, which is just, you could tell it was going to happen. However, the good thing is I've got a brand new shiny exhibition sitting there waiting for the community to see it. The community I developed it with are very excited to see it, and they completely understand that we're going to have to wait, and everyone's okay with that. So our priorities in our team for this lockdown were really taking care of ourselves better than we did last year. Our mental health, and that taking care of our families at home. It's also a time to rest, and it's a time to think about what we're going to do now, and just planning to reopen and what that looks like. And really making sure our future programs and exhibitions are flexible and adaptable. And so I was reading this really great, the COVID-19 Audience Outlook Monitor that Council for the Arts did. They've done it for a year, but the last one was in July. Survey, 75,000 people. And I thought it was really interesting what's happened to audiences, during COVID. So that's May last year to July this year. And that one is asking, I'm covering it, in the past fortnight, have you participated in any online digital arts and cultures experience? And you can see over time that purple box, which is none, has grown and grown and grown. So much less people, this time around, I think are getting a bit tired of digital experiences. And that next screen there is when venues are open and it's possible to attend in-person cultural experiences. What role do online arts and events play? And that is overwhelmingly, 89% is a small role or no role. And the last graph I'm going to show you, which statement best represents about how you feel about going out to arts and cultural events. And that yellow is now, as soon as possible, and the orange is when they're reasonably confident that the risk is low. So people are willing to take a risk to come out now, and people want to get out. So just to summarise some things we learned over the last year and a bit. We only get given so much time and energy, and we really have to prioritise where we use it. We feel like our audience is a bit over digital stuff, and they want out of lockdown, and they will come back to our physical spaces. And in our small community, we feel that because we talk to people as we pass them on the street, we're very connected to our actual audience and who's coming to see us. It's not to say that digital projects are not important. It just, they need to be well considered before you do them. We always now have a plan A, B, and C for any program or exhibition we've got on our schedule, adapted to public health orders, which I'm sure are going to change as the public health orders and vaccination rates change and what we're able to do changes. And I will just end with our most important lesson, which is just be good to each other and look after each other. We certainly prioritise looking after our team at the moment above trying to do digital and online programs and things like that in a knee-jerk reaction to what's happening. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Erica. Wow, what an amazing job you've done, and you've worked so hard. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm only going to ask you a brief question, but I'd love to come back to you at the end and ask you a question. My question is, it's clear from what you've said there that digital is not the answer to COVID contexts, nor is it an easier way of working. It sounds like it's been quite demanding on you. So how do you plan to take care of yourself, in a sense, professionally and personally in the work that you're doing, if digital has its own demands?
Yeah, and it's hard, small museums, we don't have a web team and we don't have a design team. So we are reliant on other people for that, and we run our own social media, which, as you all know, never stops. And this lockdown, we really have stopped ourselves, posting 300 photos a week or doing all of that. Everyone's I've approved anyone who wants leave, personal leave has been approved. We've made a concerted effort to take care of ourselves. Not to say we're not doing any work. Our forward program, we had an idea we've all developed together, and we're all working on that program for school holidays that are coming up. To make it exceptional, to make, rather than do 100 projects, kind of averagely, do one really excellent project that we've been focusing on that will run no matter what the lockdown restrictions are at the time. So we're guaranteed to get that dopamine hit when we finally produce something that goes live. So that's what we've been doing, but very aware of everyone's mental health, which we talk about in our workplace a lot. And we really have been careful to prioritise that.
Thanks, Erica. And like Aviva, what really comes through in your presentation is how much you love your work, and how, at the heart of it is not just connecting with the cultural material and ideas, but connecting with the people who make the culture and share the culture. It's that really matters to you, that moment of connection. So thank you for sharing that. We'll now turn to our last speaker, Rebecca Bushby, who is the Director of Audience and Creative Production in Sydney Living Museums. Beck is currently the director in that role, and she leads a team that is responsible for audience insight, marketing and communications, digital design, production experience, cultural engagement, and curatorial research. That's a lot of hats. And she has previously worked in leadership roles responsible for production and delivery of visitor experiences, collection management, content creation at leading national and state cultural institutions. Rebecca currently manages teams to deliver strong narratives and pursues innovative visitor experiences to engage a wide range of audiences across various platforms. Over to you, Beck.
Thanks, Kira. And these are incredible presentations to be following. So much work that's been taking place. I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm presenting from Gadigal country and pay my respects to traditional owners of the lands on which we're all living and working. I'll just share my screen, technology permitting. Hopefully everyone's got that. So I thought I would talk through our approach to the COVID restrictions that we encountered in 2020 and how that's impacted on what we've just encountered this year and continue to encounter in 21. And following a similar line actually to the experience that Erica's just presented, you'll find probably a lot of similarities, but on a slightly different scale. And I feel spoiled, Erica, to have such a comprehensive team in our organisation, but facing the same challenges. Like almost every museum and gallery in 2020, we were faced with the unfortunate news that our site access and programs were going to be heavily impacted. In mid-March, our on-site programming was suspended. We had only just opened the Hyde Park Barracks after a major investment and significant renewal of that property. And I guess that was a very disappointing moment for us as an organisation to be closing a site after such a build-up. So things quickly progressed, as we know, and we were forced to cancel face-to-face public programs. We had to contact ticket holders and arrange refunds. We had to rebook all of our learning programs that range across our 12 properties and rebook those into future terms where we could. We closed our museums and we closed our houses. It impacted exhibitions that were installed, of course. They were closed to the public, but there were exhibitions that and programs that didn't go ahead at all. We had changed our external messaging to provide clear direction about the closure, and we encouraged heavily our audience to stay connected with us because that was our priority. We quickly diverted all of our activities in the forward program, so that was exhibitions, festivals and public programs, to a digital format. In many cases it required, as Erica has just outlined as well, a significant additional program of work for the team to ensure that the content that we produced for face-to-face was going to adapt directly into digital platforms. Our digital and marketing teams were flexible and responsive and ensured that we could present live from our sites. We could use green screen in the studios. We could run live webinars. We could create short clips for social media as we had a very hungry marketing content schedule following the campaign #DiscoverSLM. In addition to all of this, we ran additional programs for our members only because we wanted to keep them connected specifically. And our supplemented membership offer was to extend those memberships so that the period of time when they could physically access sites was extended when we reopened. We cancelled a range of programs. We closed the closing event for Jonathan Jones's incredible installation at the Hyde Park Barracks was cancelled and didn't go ahead. We had Easter Trails, NAIDOC Week, school holiday programs, the Family Fair at Rouse Hill, the Spring Harvest at Vaucluse. Sydney Open took a bit of a hit with no on-site access, and of course we had exhibitions. We diverted quick response. Our focus, as I said, was to stay connected with our audiences and repurpose all of the work we had done. and ensure that we maintained relevance. As we all know, it was a very crowded digital environment across the GLAM sector, as everyone diverted content into an online format. Workshops, videos, performances, podcasts, festivals, you know, we've all seen those things coming through our social feeds. And of course, everything was provided free to audiences. I think there was a real a decision made, and specifically by us, that those things would be free access and not under a subscription model. So we diverted our learning programs to live and virtual excursions. Like I said, we changed the format for Sydney Open. We knew that we couldn't do on-site programming for Sydney Open earlier than we did this year. So we did divert that to a digital format with a focus that we would be engaging audience fully in that environment. So we had some great successes. We had about 16,000 people come to most of our live learning programs, so that was fantastic. We had significant engagement for Sydney Open for the digital content, and it included a lot of kind of outdoor engagement as well, so walking tours, audio tours, things like that. But we saw considerable online engagement and uptake in line with a regular year, when really people were accessing Sydney Open website for ticket sales. And we slowly reopened our sites, but not all of them. And in fact, up until the recent lockdown, we still had reduced days and reduced hours, and not all of our properties had reopened. So I did want to also take note of the audience research that has happened, and maybe Eric and I should have had a bit of a chit chat before we presented, but I won't go into all of the detail of the survey, but audience research has been really important for us in this period in between, and particularly directly after the last lockdown. So in the past 12 months, we have been really active participants in collective and individual audience research projects. And we've evaluated our own programs intensely. We've watched intently the outcomes of the research that's been taking place internationally as well. And some of this work continues as we monitor the appetite for our audiences to both return to physical site access and, like we've heard today, how we can maintain engagement through online content, and what's the importance of that content now. So we've looked at, we looked back through specifically the Australia Council work that had taken place. And I think there's been some really great insights come out of that. So our teams have been looking at some of this feedback over the past few months and looking at what it will do to, or what it will mean to us and to our audiences for the future. But it is interesting to look at how many people have participated, particularly in the digital arts and cultural experiences. You know, that has been really useful to feed back into kind of what we're doing now and what we plan for the future. And then we dig a bit deeper into what it actually means for our specific audiences, how people engage, what level of enjoyment they get out of the things we've been doing. So we did all this kind of things that everyone else was doing. We did social media quizzes, we did online puzzles, we did live streamed events. But you can see that it starts to kind of track what the level of engagement is and what the visitors and the audiences are getting out of that content for the effort that goes into producing it. So we looked at members and we looked at non-member content, so we could compare both. And what elements and content areas are people engaging in most for us? And I guess the kind of the quick wins, the things at the bottom of this list are things we can continue to do pretty easily. But as you kind of look at the top of this list, there's a lot more effort goes into providing those outcomes. So 2021, at the end of June this year, I was presenting the same news to my team again, that all of the effort and hard work that had gone into developing the programs was coming to a hold. We quickly went into lockdown this time. Kids were being homeschooled and stay-at-home orders were announced pretty quickly, and that does have an impact, I think, on the well-being of staff. And like Erica has said about her museum, we have that focus as well. This time, our response has been very different. This time we knew what was possible, what was going to have impact, and how we could effectively maintain relevance with our audiences during a period like this where we're all working from home. So we brought back Discover SLM, and we made a really clear and confident message to our staff and to our audiences that we would stay connected, but we would monitor daily New South Wales government advice, and we would respond to that as we needed to, because we wanted to ensure the well-being of our staff and the safe environment for our visitors when they return. This time our approach to storytelling and how we share history and the significance of our sites was also different. We spent this year focusing on increasing our digital capability. We were lucky enough to get a significant investment in capital at our museum, across our museum, sorry. So we wanted to make the most of that. We wanted to ensure that we had a range of assets that we could use to provide greater access for audiences ongoing. Particularly useful during times when sites can't be accessed, which could be for a whole range of reasons, to be honest. I mean, obviously now in lockdown, but also in periods where we've got capital works happening on properties, and that limits access as well. So I think it's a really important outcome last year was that we could make content accessible to broader audiences. Organisations across all sectors have quickly realised, I think, that what seemed impossible, for whether it was money or time or any of those things, quickly became achievable when it was the only option. And so I think we've set ourselves up really well. We can do all of these digital options now, produce these in-house. So that's a really fantastic thing, and I'm really proud of the team for taking that on and developing those skills so that this time around we have a very different offer. We can layer stories. So you just saw in that previous slide, we can layer stories now. So we can do the 3D fly-throughs, and we can overlay interviews and audio clips and information about objects. And I think, you know, for us, it's really enhanced our capability, which will ultimately drive really strong engagement, I think, both online and on site, because we'll find unique ways for those things to be delivered on site as well. Our offer during lockdown was based on extensive work already planned and underway. So we've focused a bit on research that was already happening. So some of that has been progressed into some of the virtual excursions that you see here, and these are kind of the setups that we have for that offer. We also developed new online learning resources. So these web stats are a bit old now, but basically we were seeing a huge take up in our online resources to kind of counter the virtual excursions and things that were happening as well. So we've also planned to enhance some of these offers ongoing. We've just had to fast track some of this work because now we've cancelled Term 3 and Term 4 learning programs for this year as well, which will have a massive impact for us. So because they've been cancelled, we can kind of redirect some of this work into producing these resources. We had 2 exhibitions which sadly didn't open. They were right at the end of install, and you can see in these photos, this is apart from the gentleman that's lying on the floor fixing the wall who's still not there. This is what these galleries still look like. So this was walking through a songline from the national, which we have loaned from the National Museum of Australia, and History Reflected, which is a project partnership, a collaboration with the State Archives, showcasing their incredible collection. So they're our exhibitions lost, I guess. That's what it looks like in the galleries now. And because of the way that we've planned the program, they won't be open when we reopen the Museum of Sydney, which is a bit sad. But what we did do was use the research that had been undertaken. We produced a kind of lo-fi response to weekly content delivery that relates to this project specifically, with our staff presenting weekly sessions. So we present focused curated talks on Tuesday and project-based talks on Thursdays. The Tuesday program allows for us to present recent research and interesting collection finds like today, and I hope some people had the opportunity to catch Jackie Newling talking about the collection of recipes owned by Rose Seidler, which have been translated by some of our team from their original German into English, which provides an insight into the crossing of cultures and highlighting Rose's culinary repertoire. We've created a behind the scenes series for History Reflected, which is our Thursday session at the moment, which exposes the research that the curators undertook to develop the exhibition content, which usually just kind of gets, put away until it's needed. But we've been able to kind of use some of those backstories and share that content with our audiences. We did this whilst we considered the impact of lockdown and whether the exhibition could actually open at all. And now, only this week, we've actually been able to adjust our forward program. So not all is lost, and we will reinstate these two shows into 2022 at the Museum of Sydney. So it was a real shame that we left them partly installed, and I think it does provide some real comfort for the teams that have worked on that to see that they will come back. Our public programs this year didn't divert automatically to digital, but we're working with partners to see what aspects can be delivered on online formats with talk series, workshops, and we are in the process of reconfiguring Sydney Open with no on-site visits again, which is really disappointing, but still provides some content. What we have done is spend time recasting the forward program for 22 and 23 and enhance the existing program content we've developed into those future years. But our creative direction for the offer for 2022 is Life Reimagined. And I've got to say, it's looking pretty exciting. So this is a sneak peek at something that will be appearing in the Museum of Sydney for next year's program, an exhibition called Iridescent by Gerwin Davies, which we're really excited about. So that we've got that to look forward to. But I would encourage you to follow us on social media and stay up to date with the new content as it arises, and look forward to our future program, which hopefully we get to see coming out at the end of the year. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Beck. Absolutely fantastic stuff. I'm sure that, like everybody else who's in the audience today, that there's so much admiration and, in fact, awe for your passion and commitment, all of you, and how nimble you've been, how the effort and energy and passion that you share. So I'd like to, on behalf of all the people in Australia, thank you for the kind of energy that the three of you bring to your work. We're coming to the end of our, coming very close, in fact, to our 6 o'clock end. But lest this become another lost exhibition, I do want to finish with one question for each of you, and I'll start with you, Beck, which is the future reimagined. Let's pick that up as a question and say, where to now? You know, we've seen digital exhaustion, but we've seen that it's also important. What are you thinking for people out there who are asking that question, where to now? What kind of future is there? What does the future look like, the reimagined future?
Well, for us, I think, you know, we've learned so much from the period we've been through, the good, the bad and the ugly of that, I think, you know, like we know what we're capable of. We know what our audiences want, or we hope we do. And if we don't, we'll keep working at that. But I think, like you say, we've just got incredibly dedicated and passionate people who love what they do and just want to always push it a little bit further. So I think what's exciting about kind of the future, is that we'll always be looking for that little something extra. And from all of these things that we did, whether they were quick response or an incredible amount of time, I think we take something away from all of those that just makes our kind of offer a bit better. So I hope things like, you know, making everything accessible in every way possible, you know, kind of stays with us, because I think there's a level of accessibility we have now that we didn't have before.
Yeah, and I was really taken by your comment just before, which was things that we were previously told were impossible to do suddenly became possible. And that seems to be something that we could be holding across above the water above our heads, saying this is a new reality for us.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what's really important is that, and it sounds like Tweed have experienced this as well, is that, you know, you can push hard, and for certain things we'll want to do that, but it's really important to kind of reflect on the work we've done, the way we've worked, to make sure that we get a really balanced view of what's right. You know, it's I think you can automatically go into kind of overdrive, and what we took away was stop and think about it. Quick wins are great, and you get that content out as quick as you can, but don't compromise on the quality. Sometimes it's better to just stop and think about how to do it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Beck. Erica, I'd like to throw the same question to you. So kind of where to now? What is the future reimagined looking like for you at Tweed?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, exactly what Beck was saying, is that building things with that accessibility in mind, and coming, you know, then crossing with quality, well thought out programs. You know, our forward program and exhibitions now are so exciting. They're built with all this accessibility in mind and with COVID in mind, to be almost, you know, bulletproof. But having that time to stop and reflect and really shape those things into really, that are going to be really rewarding and really great projects, that's the future for us, that's for sure. And we're pretty excited about it. And, you know, it kind of couldn't have happened without taking time to take a step back and have a rest and regroup and rethink and shape our future programming.
And I noticed in your presentation that you mentioned that QR codes have suddenly taken, you know, obviously people are now using them, and that you were able to take advantage of their new utilisation to make it a kind of key component of your programming.
Yes, my whole team laughs at me because for years I've hated QR codes, and everyone has wanted to use them, and I've said, no, we're not using them over my dead body. And then I had to kind of swallow that and go, yeah, okay, yeah, we can use some of these. They've been super successful for us in places in our galleries where there's sound. You know, we've got some interactives where you can hear some native bird calls, and people can pick that up and then take it home, the bird call on their phone, which they've really been enjoying. And then they interact at home with that sound, you know, that we know of. They play it again to see if they can hear the birds, which never would have happened if they could only listen to the sound in the gallery, which is really surprising and not what we thought would happen.
So what I hear in that, just briefly, is also that the content of the museum is going into people's homes and as well as their hearts, and becoming part of their everyday life, so that boundaries are blurring, as well as concepts of how we do our work.
Yeah, exactly. They are blurring, and you just got to be flexible enough to kind of capture all the good things at the moment that they're happening. You know, like changing your mind about QR codes now that everyone uses them. They're all right.
And it's always a good thing to change your mind, huh? What do they say? A wise man changes his mind, a fool never.
Yeah, that's it.
Avita, let's finish with you and the evocative image of Where is the Little Street, which seems to sort of just bring into our minds the idea of where is little exhibitions. and I guess I'd like to invite you to just talk about where you see the Jewish Museum has grown and benefited, and where it might go because of the COVID context.
I think, first of all, I must take our hats off to our marketing team. They've done an amazing job of giving so much online. They've put Holocaust survivor stories online. They've put amazing blogs online. They've put exhibitions online. With the Wendy Sharp, someone did ask where they could see it. So if they go onto the Sydney Jewish Museum website, there are lots of webinars on demand. We've had, funnily enough, amazing webinar audience participation. We had 500 people to each of Wendy's online webinars. So I think if the topic's right, we do get a lot of interest. Our education team's also done an amazing job of being able to stay in touch with the schools and switch to online presentations with so short a time, and their presentations and their programs to the schools have been absolutely amazing. So although we really miss the children in the museum, our education team have done an amazing job of going out and still being able to. My hope for the future is that we can reopen sooner than later, because our Holocaust survivors, the museum is their life. The museum presentations, being at the museum is part of who they are, and they're all aging and they're finding it incredibly difficult. They're lonely and they feel their time's running out for them. So for us, that's our main aim, to really give the Holocaust survivors the opportunity, hopefully not only online, but in the museum, of still being able to connect with people, to share their stories with school students and adults. So let's hope that 2022 does bring us back to opening our doors. As I say, the team has done an amazing job to keep the museum going, to keep the museum really relevant. We had another exhibition last year, which was called The Jews from Islamic Lands, which was so beautifully curated. And we'd waited a very long time because the Jews that were expelled from Islamic lands felt that their story had never been told. And we our curators put together the most beautiful exhibition, which again was never launched, had a very, very short period where people could come and see it, but they have filmed it in an amazing way, and it will shortly be up on our website. So hopefully that will be another exhibition that wasn't entirely lost and will be able to be seen. And well done to Erica and Rebecca for your wonderful presentations and for all you're doing in your museums. Let's all bandy together and send up our prayers and hopes that our museums will continue and grow from strength to strength. And thank you so much for putting on this wonderful presentation today.
Thank you, Aviva. It's very moving, isn't it? Not just the lost exhibitions, but how much the people who create those exhibitions care for our culture and our collections. And today's presentation has really made me feel how important it is for us to care for them as well, and to really honour the work that they do and the passion that they bring to the work and the teams that they that do that work. So I'd like to just stop for a moment and make that acknowledgement that the work you do, how hard you are, how nimble you've been, is truly fantastic. And I do think that Australian culture and museums are in good hands if people like you are representative of the rest of your amazing GLAM community. I'd also like to make a special thanks tonight to our Executive Director at the History Council of New South Wales, Catherine Shirley. This event was largely her idea, and she's put a lot of time into curating it. So hats off to Catherine as well. So a huge thanks to our speakers who have not only given us this hour, but also prepared wonderful presentations. And I invite you to make comments, reach out to them, and to thank them in the chat box. I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that the History Council of New South Wales receives funding from the New South Wales government and Create New South Wales, as many other cultural partners and history supporters. Thank you also to Cassandra Rogers, who is another staff member at the History Council and does so much behind the scenes to make these events work. There's so much else going on in History Week 2021. You might have a bit of digital exhaustion, but hopefully we've picked you up and you'll keep going. Get through this week because that's really cool. So thanks, guys. Thanks for being involved. Have a great dinner. Have a great night. Have a great week. Get your history on, and we'll see you around the traps. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
you.